Married 3 years, Victor cheated 7 times. Each time I cried and made a scene, he apologized, and the cycle repeated. Until his first love returned to the country, and I became quiet. At the banquet, I stared at her aloof, noble pianist brother, my heart pounding like a drum. It turned out I hadn't stopped being able to love. I just hadn't met the right person. Victor was still clutching his first love memories, reminiscing about the past. As for me, I'd already worked out how to turn her brother into my husband. Victor was the one who told me the news of Vivian's return in person. He spoke with his eyes on the window, fingertips tapping lightly on the table, like he was mentioning something trivial. I knew he was waiting for me to, as before, smash the cup in my hand. Or to cry and ask him why he always did this. But I only hummed and kept applying my lipstick. Victor turned his face, a stranger's curiosity in his eyes. "You don't have anything to say?" I pressed my lips together, evening out the color. The person in the mirror's brow and eyes were calm. "Did you have a smooth trip? Say hello for me." He stood there stunned, as if a fist had struck cotton. The banquet was hosted by the Lin family to welcome Vivian back to the country. Victor changed suits 3 times and finally chose the one I had praised as making him look sentimental. I chose the simplest black dress, leaving my neck bare and wearing only a pair of pearl studs. As he hooked my arm and we walked in, I felt the tension in his muscles. Vivian stood in the middle of the crowd, her white dress purer than snow, her smile radiant. She waved at Victor, her eyes sparkling. Victor instinctively wanted to let go of my hand. I withdrew my arm first. "Go." He looked a little awkward and said softly, "Don't read too much into it." I smiled, my gaze already passing over his shoulder. It landed by the piano in the corner. He sat on the piano bench, his profile cold as snow on a distant mountain. His fingers rested on the keys, but he didn't play. The surrounding clamor seemed separated from him by a pane of glass. Vivian tugged Victor over, her voice bright, "Brother, look who's here." He lifted his eyes. He looked at Victor first and gave a faint nod. Then his gaze fell on me. It lingered for a second. Maybe even less. But the pile of ash in my heart that had been cold for so long suddenly flared into flame. Victor hovered around Vivian all evening. Pouring drinks, exchanging jokes, brushing the colorful ribbons from her shoulders. Just like every time before. I sat on a high stool by the window, sipping champagne in small mouthfuls. I was looking toward the piano. He later played Moonlight. As his fingers rose and fell, a chilly halo seemed to flow through the whole room. When the piece ended, he rose and left his seat. As he passed me, he carried with him a faint scent of cedar. I set the cup down and followed him out. The night breeze on the terrace was slightly cool. He leaned against the railing, a fingertip flickering with a spot of scarlet. "Something wrong?" His voice was a few degrees colder than the piano. I walked up beside him and, copying his posture, looked out at the city's lights. "You play so well." "Thank you." Silence spread like the darkness. Yet I found it far more comforting than the noisy, false pleasantries inside. "Vivian's brother," I turned my head, "what's your name?" He stubbed out his cigarette, his profile was exceptionally clear in the light and shadow. "Damien." "Oh." I nodded. "I'm Serena. Victor's wife." Only then did he look at me properly. "I know." That night on the way back, Victor kept talking in the car. He talked about how hard things had been for Vivian over the years, how she was still so innocent and fond of smiling. I leaned against the car window, the glass reflected the faint upturn of my mouth. What I was thinking of was another face. That touch of crisp cedar still seemed to linger at the tip of my nose. "Are you listening?" Victor sounded a little displeased. "I'm listening." My voice was light. "Happy for her." He seemed choked. Once we got home, for the first time he didn't go to the study, he followed me into the bedroom. "Serena, let's talk." I took out my earring and looked at him in the dressing mirror. "Talk about what?" About which time tonight you knocked her wine glass over? His expression changed. So you really do care? I shook my head. I don't. I was telling the truth. The emotion surging in his eyes suddenly felt so distant to me. I began asking around about Damien. A pianist, he spent most years touring abroad, solitary by nature, rarely attending social events. He liked Brahms and hated sweets. Every Wednesday afternoon he would go to the old piano shop in the southern part of town to tune. In the shop street-facing window sat an old Steinway. On Wednesday, I walked past wearing a newly bought mist blue dress. He was bent over checking the strings when he heard the wind chimes and looked up. Seeing me, his hands paused for a moment. What a coincidence. I stepped up to the instrument, my fingers brushing its glossy lacquer. Not really. He bowed his head and went on tuning. This street only leads to the music shop. I smiled. Then let's say I came on purpose. He didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth seemed to curve. Victor began coming home late. He smelled of unfamiliar perfume, mixed with alcohol. Sometimes he'd test me, leaving the little things Vivian had given him in plain sight, a lipstick, a silk scarf. I used to throw them in the trash. Now I simply pretend I don't see them. My heart is very busy. Busy noting the cafes Damien frequents, the record labels he favors, the little habit of frowning when he adjusts the sound. Affection turns out to shift like that. Not a sudden collapse. More like an hourglass, slowly leaking emptiness from one side while quietly piling fullness on the other. Vivian finally took the initiative to ask to meet me. In the tea-house private room, she looked pitiable. Serena, don't blame Victor, it's my fault. I stirred the matcha milk foam in my cup and suddenly remembered Damien hates sweets. Maybe I should ask him out for tea next time? Serena? I snapped back to the present and smiled at her. Your affairs are for you to handle yourselves. She had tears braced in her eyes. I'm not angry. I glanced at the time. Sorry, I have plans to see an art exhibition. As I stood up, I added softly, also, just call me sister, we can be a bit closer. She froze. The exhibition was of the abstract kind Damien liked. I found him in front of a painting of riotous color. Today he wore a gray sweater, which softened that air of severity. You like Klee too? He asked. I like him now, I answered frankly. He looked at me. The look lasted long enough for me to make out the faint shadow his eyelashes cast. After the exhibition we walked by the river. The late autumn wind was bitingly cold, yet I felt a warm glow inside. Victor isn't good to you, he said suddenly. Not a question, but a statement. I kicked a small stone at my feet. It's all in the past. Then why are we still together? I stopped, turned to face him. The river breeze mussed my hair and brightened my eyes. Because I've been waiting for you to show up. He froze. In the dusk, a faint flush crept up his ears. On Wednesday afternoon at the music shop, sunlight streamed through the old display window, cutting warm golden squares across the old Steinway. I had arrived a little early. Damien hadn't come yet, only the elderly shopkeeper was dozing, the radio crooning Sujo Pingtan. I gently lifted the lid and let my fingers brush the slightly yellowed ivory keys. Want to try? His voice came from behind, a little breathless as if he'd hurried. I drew my hand back and turned, smiling. I'll wait for you to teach me. He was wearing a light gray cotton linen shirt today, sleeves casually rolled up, revealing a lean wrist. He still smelled of that clean cedar. The first movement of Clair de Lune isn't difficult. He gestured for me to sit. The piano bench was narrow, we sat side by side, our arms barely touching. His fingers pressed a few notes first, demonstrating the fingering. Then he took my wrist and gently placed it on the keys. You must be light here, like touching moonlight. The palm of his hand was warm, his fingertips roughened with thin calluses. My skin remembered that sensation. That day he taught me for half an hour. I learned slowly and often hit the wrong notes. He never rushed me. Whenever I got stuck, he would take my hand again and walk me through it. You are very patient, I said as we left. Tuning a violin requires even more patience, he said, locking the shop door. You adjust it string by string, you can't hurry it. We walked along the old street. The plane tree leaves had turned halfway to yellow, and whenever the wind blew they fluttered down. He walked steadily, his pace neither hurried nor slow. I matched his rhythm, and for the first time I felt that walking could be a pleasant thing. Your sister comes to see Victor often, I said suddenly. Damien was silent for a moment. Vivian is spoiled. His voice was flat. She always thinks whatever she likes ought to belong to her. And you? I asked. Would you take something that belongs to someone else? He stopped, turned his head, and looked at me. His gaze was as deep as an autumn pool. I will only wait. Wait for what? Wait for it to come on its own. A plane tree leaf happened to fall on my shoulder. He reached out and brushed it away, the motion so natural it seemed he'd done it 1,000 times. Victor has been home for dinner rarely these days. When he does come back, he always carries an indelible scent of cologne, mingled with whiskey and tobacco. He has begun bringing me gifts. Expensive silk scarves, limited edition perfumes, and in a jewelry box lay a dazzling diamond necklace. These were the kinds of things that once would have made me cry with joy. Now I only say a quiet thank you, too lazy even to open the box. You don't like it? Last night he stopped me, bloodshot in his eyes. I like it. I put the necklace back in the jewelry box. It just doesn't suit me anymore. What would suit you then? His voice was a little urgent. Tell me, I'll buy it. I looked at him and suddenly felt a stranger. This man who squandered money on me seemed to have never truly seen me. Get some rest. I walked past him and went upstairs. At the stair landing I caught sight of him standing in the center of the living room, the necklace clenched in his hand. The light stretched his shadow long. Lonely as an island. Damien and I began dating like a couple. Though neither of us ever said the word. On Friday night, he took me to a little restaurant tucked deep in an alley. The owner was an old acquaintance of his, a retired symphony orchestra violinist. The place had only 4 tables, the menu written on a chalkboard, changing every day. Same as usual? The owner asked with a smile. Damien nodded, then looked at me. Fish okay? Their scallion braised crucian carp is very good. Okay. While we waited for the food, he told me amusing stories from the orchestra's tour. He said that before a performance at Vienna's Golden Hall, the whole ensemble had stomach trouble at once. He said he was chased for 3 blocks by an obsessed fan in Tokyo. He said he played under the aurora in Reykjavik, the keys so cold his fingers went numb. I propped my cheek on my hand and listened, watching the slight lift at the corner of his mouth as he spoke. Those distant lives I had never shared were, through his telling, slowly unfurling before me. And you? He suddenly asked. Besides being Victor's wife, who are you? I was momentarily stunned. Victor had never asked that question. I like to paint. But I haven't painted in a long time. Why? Victor said those paints smell bad and the art supplies take up space. I was surprised even as I said it. It turned out I'd abandoned so much of myself over the years. Damien watched me quietly. Next time you come to the music shop, bring your art supplies, he said. There's an empty room on the 2nd floor with great light. The carp was brought up, steaming hot. He carefully picked out the big bones and put the fattest belly piece into my bowl. Be careful, there are small bones too. I lowered my head to eat the fish, my eyes felt a little warm. On Saturday afternoon, we went to the art museum. The current exhibition was French Impressionism, and Monet's original water lilies had made the rare tour to this place. There weren't many people in the gallery. We stood for a long time in front of a painting titled Impression, Sunrise. The colors seemed to be flowing, I said softly. Like Debussy's music, he said. We looked at each other and laughed. That kind of understanding needed no explanation. After the exhibition we rested at the museum cafe. He ordered black coffee, I had hot chocolate. Sweets make people happy, I said. Temporary happiness, he replied lightly, then reached over and brushed the cream from my lip with his fingertip. The motion was so natural it made my heart skip a beat. Rain began to fall outside. The autumn rain was fine, laying a hazy gray veil over the world. None of us were in a hurry to leave, we just watched the rain like that. Victor went with Vivian to try on wedding dresses today, I said suddenly. When the words came out, I was surprised by how calm I felt. Damien twirled his coffee cup. I know. Aren't you going to talk your sister out of it? I advised her. He looked out the window. She said it's a dream she's waited 10 years for. Rain pattered. And you? What's your dream? He turned his head, his gaze falling on my face. After a long time, he said softly, a dream I won't wake from. Victor came back late at night. Reeking of alcohol, with a glaring kiss mark on his neck. He collapsed onto the sofa and called my name. Serena. Serena. I stood on the stairs and looked at him coldly. You're awake? He sat up groggily. Pour me a glass of water. I didn't move. He rubbed his temples, his voice hoarse. Vivian cried today and apologized to you. I said it was okay, that you're magnanimous. I laughed. The sound of it felt abrupt in the quiet night. Victor looked up, his eyes hazy with drink. What are you laughing at? At myself, I said, descending the stairs slowly, and at you. I poured a glass of water and set it on the coffee table. The clink of the glass against the marble was sharp, like something breaking. Victor, how long has it been since we really talked? He froze. You never tell me what you're busy with each day, who you're with, I don't ask, and you don't say. I sat down opposite him. But what I do, what I think, you never care about. He opened his mouth, as if to argue. I went on. Like this glass of water. I pointed at the tea table. You only think of it when you're thirsty. You drink it, put it down, and only pick it up again the next time you're thirsty. You never wonder whether the water will go cold, whether the cup is dirty, or, I paused. Whether it wants to be taken for granted like that forever. Victor's drunkenness seemed to have mostly worn off. He looked at me, his gaze clearing from confusion to clarity. Then panic. Serena, did someone tell you something? Do I need someone to tell me? I asked calmly. The smell of perfume on you, the marks on your neck, the time you came home in the early hours, which of those needed someone else to point out? His face went pale. Vivian and I are not what you think. Thinking what? I cut him off. Victor, I don't want to anymore. I stood up. From today on, do as you please. We're done. I turned and went upstairs. Halfway up, I heard his hoarse voice, you've changed. I stopped, didn't look back. Yeah. Finally changed. On Sunday, Damien invited me to the old book market in the south of town. Calling it a book market was generous, it was really an old street along the river, stalls of second-hand books lining the weekend. The air smelled of musty paper, mixed with the dampness from the river. We stopped at a stall that sold sheet music exclusively. Damien crouched down and rummaged carefully. Sunlight filtered through the sycamore leaves, dancing on his shoulders. I watched his focused profile and suddenly wanted to sketch it. Found it. He pulled out a yellowed booklet. It was the first edition of Schumann's Kinderscenen, the page edges had already gone brittle. Here. He handed it to me. A meeting gift. I opened it, inside were tiny pencil annotations, the handwriting neat. This is the score my teacher used when he was young, he said with a smile. He lost it later, didn't expect to find it here. It's too precious, I can't accept it. Take it. He closed my fingers around it. It should belong to someone who will cherish it. We kept walking. Passing a stall that sold old ceramics, I caught sight of a pair of small blue and white cups. The glaze was soft and warm, they were painted with entwined lotus vines. Like it? Damien asked. He paid, then handed me one of them. One each. I cradled the little cup, my palm was warm. It felt like holding a small, whole moon. At noon we ate noodles at a little riverside noodle shop. His skill was better than the owner's, he helped pick all the cilantro off my bowl, leaving it spotless. How did you know I don't eat cilantro? I asked, surprised. Last time we had fish, you pushed it all to one side. Such a tiny gesture, and he remembered it. Steam from the soup rose up. It blurred his face, and it blurred my eyes. Damien. I called his name softly. If I had met you sooner. If I hadn't married Victor. I couldn't bring myself to say the rest. But he seemed to understand anyway. Through the heat, his hand crossed the table and gently covered the back of mine. No ifs, he said. Only now. Victor began coming home on time. At 6:30, the sound of keys turning in the lock would ring true. He often carried things in his hands, a bouquet of fresh lilies, a box of pastries from an old renowned shop, and once even a plush teddy bear. Passed by the florist and saw the lilies in full bloom. Wong's osmanthus cakes, you used to love them. Does the bear look like you? Its eyes are round. When he handed me the things, there was a cautious, appeasing look in his eyes. Like a child who'd done something wrong giving over a makeup assignment. I took them, said thank you, then put the flowers in a vase, the pastries in the fridge, the teddy in the corner of the sofa. My movements were smooth, without pause, without surprise. Victor stood in the doorway watching me, the smile at the corner of his mouth gradually stiffening. What do you want for dinner? He took off his coat. I'll make it. Anything. I hugged my drawing board and headed upstairs. I had plans with Damien today to paint the sunset. Serena. He called after me. Tonight He chose his words carefully, let's have a proper meal, like we used to, okay? The earnestness in his eyes was so genuine. If it had been 6 months ago, I would have been overjoyed. Now I only felt weary. Okay. I said. Then I turned and went upstairs. As I closed the door, I heard him let out a small sigh downstairs. The studio faces west, the afternoon light is best. I set up the easel and mixed my paints. On the canvas remained last week's sketch, the corner of a piano, a long-fingered hand resting on the keys. Only the hands, no person. But every time I look, I can recall Damien's profile as he bowed his head to tune. The phone vibrated. A 1932 Bechstein arrived at the music shop today, its tone is beautiful. Want to hear it? Damien's messages are always like that. He doesn't ask if I'm free, he just gives me an invitation I can't refuse. What time? At sunset. Sheen is on the 2nd floor, the window faces west. I looked out the window. The autumn sky was high and distant, the clouds tinged a faint golden pink. All right. I'll bring my painting supplies. I'll wait for you. I set the phone down and returned to mixing colors. Cobalt blue with a touch of magenta, the color of the dusk sky just before it sinks into darkness. Dinner was Victor's doing, 3 dishes and a soup. Stir-fried seasonal vegetables, sweet and sour spare ribs, braised tofu with scallions, and a pot of milky Crucian carp soup. His cooking had improved a lot. The fish soup was richly simmered, without any fishy smell, sprinkled with fine chopped scallions. Try it. He ladled a bowl and handed it to me. I took it and scooped a spoonful. The temperature was just right, the seasoning balanced. Delicious, I said. His eyes lit up, like a child who'd received a compliment. Then I'll make it for you every day. I didn't answer, I bowed my head and sipped my soup. The table was very quiet, save for the clinking of bowls and chopsticks. Victor tried to speak several times, glanced at my face, then swallowed his words. Finally he said, Vivian called today and said she wanted to see a play. I picked up a piece of tofu. I turned her down, he said quickly. I said. I had to go home to have dinner with my wife. He finished and looked at me, as if waiting for some kind of reaction. I looked up. You could actually go. It's hard to get tickets for that play, don't waste them. My tone was calm, even bordering on considerate. But Victor's face drained of color bit by bit. Serena, his voice was hoarse, I chose you. I put my chopsticks down. Outside, the sky had gone completely dark. Victor, I said softly, wasn't choosing me the right thing to do? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I am your wife. I continued, you chose me the way you use chopsticks to eat or an umbrella to keep off the rain, it's a duty, not a favor. But you used to. I used to be foolish. I smiled. I mistook duty for deep affection, took what was owed for a mercy. I'm not foolish anymore. I stood up and began clearing the dishes. Victor sat there, motionless. The light shone down on him from above, casting a shadow that was dark and heavy. I'm going to the music store. I washed the dishes and dried my hands. I'll be back later. Going to lessons again? His voice was hoarse. That teacher, male or female? I walked to the entryway to change my shoes. Does it matter? As I closed the door, I saw him through the crack. He kept his head down, his shoulders slumped, like a puppet drained of strength. The music shop's second floor was more beautiful than I had imagined. The old Bechstein leaned against the window, its dark golden lacquer shimmered in the dusk light with a honeyed glow. Damien sat on the piano bench, testing the sound. Hearing my footsteps, he glanced back. Perfect timing. He played a short passage. The notes poured from the piano like a stream, mellow, warm, like well-aged wine. Schubert's Impromptu, he said. Fits the dusk. I sat down beside him. The easel stood by the window, the paints had already been mixed. You paint, I'll play, he said. And so dusk acquired color and sound. His fingers rose and fell over the keys while my brush swept across the canvas. The sunset inched along, stretching our shadows until they lengthened and finally overlapped on the floor. At one moment he reached a passage and suddenly stopped. Here, he said, pointing at the sheet music, I can never play this right. I leaned in to watch. It was a sequence of triplet arpeggios modulating, the fingering intricate. Let me try. Just as my hand touched the keys, he took my hand from behind. His chest pressed against my back, his breath grazing my ear. Like this, he guided my fingers as they moved, soft, but with strength. Our hands danced together over the keys. The notes seemed to come alive, bursting out with joyful energy. That short passage finished, and no one moved. The sun had just slipped behind the buildings, the sky was the color of embers after a blaze. Serena. He called my name softly. If I had come back to the country sooner. No ifs. I leaned into his arms. Now is the best time. His arms circled me, his chin rested on the crown of my head. We sat like that, watching the sky shift from orange to indigo. Watching the first star appear. As if someone had finally opened their eyes. Victor began following me. At first I didn't notice. Until one day after leaving the music shop, I saw a familiar car reflected in the cafe window on the street corner. A black Mercedes, the last digits of the license plate were Victor's birthday. I stood by the curb and took out my phone to text Damien. Someone's following me. A few minutes later, he came out of the music shop, carrying my art case. I'll walk you home. We walked side by side on the old street's cobblestones. His arm slipped naturally around my shoulders. I turned my head and, from the corner of my eye, saw the car following slowly behind us. Like a silent, stubborn shadow. Aren't you afraid he'll see? I asked. Damien looked down at me. Are you? I thought for a moment and shook my head. Then let him see. We walked slowly, as if taking a stroll. Passing a stall selling candied roasted chestnuts, he bought a bag, cracked open the first one and handed it to me. The chestnuts were warm, their sweet fragrance spreading through the cold air. I ate a chestnut while he carried the painter's box. The car had been following us the whole time, keeping a distance neither too close nor too far. Like a silent standoff. We reached the apartment gate and Damien stopped. "This is as far as I go." I nodded and took the painter's box from him. Suddenly he leaned down and gently pressed a kiss to my forehead. It was very light, like a falling leaf touching the surface of the water. "See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." I turned and walked into the residential complex. From the gate to the building, it was a little over 100 steps. I could feel that gaze on my back. Blazing, painful, as if it were going to burn a hole through me. But I didn't look back. Not once. The choral broke out on a Friday night. Damien had a small private recital and had invited me to be the sole audience. In an old villa in the southern part of the city, the host was an old friend of his, a piano collector who lived in France. That night I wore a dark green velvet gown and pearl stud earrings. When Damien came to fetch me, there was undisguised admiration in his eyes. "Like you've stepped out of a Renaissance painting," he said. I smiled and slipped my arm through his. The recital was short, only 6 pieces. But each one was played for me. When the last piece ended, the elderly collector applauded and came over. "Damien has never played like that for anyone," he said with a smile. "Miss, you are very special." I blushed, and Damien tightened his hold on my hand. By the time it ended, it was late at night. Damien drove me home and stopped the car outside the residential complex. We stood under the streetlight to say goodbye. "I'm going to perform in Berlin next week," he said, "for 10 days. That long?" "If you want," he said, looking at me, "you can come along. Berlin's galleries are beautiful in the autumn." My heart skipped a few beats. "I'll think about it." "Okay." He bowed his head and kissed my lips. The kiss was deep, carrying the taste of reluctance and promise. When we broke apart, we were both a little breathless. "Go in." He smoothed back my hair at the temples. "Message me when you get there." I nodded and turned to walk into the complex. My footsteps felt so light they might lift me off the ground. The living room light was blazing. Victor sat on the sofa, the ashtray in front of him overflowing with butts. He watched me come in, his gaze as cold as ice and as hot as fire. "Did you have fun?" His voice was hoarse. I set my bag down. "It was okay." "That man," he paused, each word squeezed out between his teeth, "is Vivian's brother, isn't he?" My hand faltered slightly as I took off my coat, then I continued hanging it on the rack. "Yes." "Yes?" He sprang up abruptly and took a step toward me, then another. "So all this time you've been going out every day, going to the music shop, visiting galleries, listening to concerts, all with him?" I did not deny it. I turned to face him. "Yes." The last flush of blood drained from his face. "Why him of all people?" His voice trembled violently. "It could have been anyone, why had it to be Vivian's brother?" I watched the shock, the humiliation, and a kind of absurd rage churn in his eyes and suddenly found it a little laughable. "Does that matter?" "It matters," he snarled. "Serena, is this how you're getting back at me and Vivian?" I stared at his face, reddened with excitement. "Getting back at you?" I repeated the word softly and shook my head. "Victor, you think far too highly of yourself. I don't need to get back at you." I walked to the liquor cabinet and poured a glass of water. The cold rim of the glass sobered me. "I just happened to fall in love with him. That's all." "Happened to?" He sounded as if he'd heard a ridiculous joke. "Happened to fall in love with the one person who could humiliate me the most? Happened in the middle of me and Vivian." "Victor," I cut him off, my voice very calm, "you and Vivian are in the past. It's me and Damien now." He staggered, one hand bracing the back of the sofa as if he couldn't stay upright. You admit it, you admit you cheated? If you insist on putting it that way. I put down my glass, turned fully to face him, then yes. I'm in love with Damien. I want to be with him. I paused, enunciating the sentence clearly, so, let's get a divorce. The air fell dead silent. He stared at me, his expression shifting from fury to overwhelming panic. Serena. He grabbed the hem of my dress and dropped to his knees, tears falling without warning. I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Like so many times before when he cheated and begged me for forgiveness. Don't leave me, please. I looked down at him. This man who had once been so full of vigor was now kneeling at my feet, tears streaming down his face. There was a time I would have been tender, would have softened, would have forgiven him again and again. Now I only felt pity. Victor, get up. You look terrible like this. I won't, he clung to my leg. Unless you promise not to leave me. Serena, let's start over, okay? I'll give you all the company shares, I'll give you the house and the car, I don't want anything else, I only want you. He cried like a child. Tears soaked the hem of my skirt. Victor, I said softly, don't you understand yet? I don't love you anymore. From the first night you stayed out all night, from the first time you lied to me, from the first time the tenderness you gave me was given to someone else, the love died bit by bit. Now it's dead through and through. There isn't even any ash left. He shook his head, shaking it desperately. No. No. That's not true, you still love me, you're just angry, you're mad at me and Vivian. I'm not angry anymore. I crouched down and looked into his eyes. Victor, I'm really not angry anymore. Because I don't care. He froze, tears clinging to his eyelashes. Who you're with now, what you're doing, what time you come home. I don't care about any of it. It's like you wouldn't care how many leaves fell from the tree outside today. That has nothing to do with me anymore. I slowly pulled my skirt out of his grasp. The movement was light, but resolute. I'll have the divorce papers drawn up by a lawyer. The house is mine, we split the savings, and I don't want a single share of the company. From now on, you're free. You can openly love Vivian, give her your name, have children with her. I stood up and walked to the top of the stairs. And I will love whoever I choose to love. That's fine, isn't it? Victor knelt there motionless. The expression on his face shifted from despair, to bewilderment, to a hollow numbness. Serena. He murmured, you really, don't want me anymore? I didn't answer. I turned and went upstairs. Halfway up, I heard his suppressed, shattered sobbing. Like a wounded beast howling in the dead of night. I didn't stop. I pushed open the bedroom door, moonlight poured over the bed. I picked up my phone and messaged Damien. I told him. A few seconds later, the screen lit up. Wait for me to come back. Okay. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The night sky was clear, the stars strewn across it. Damien and I married in spring. There was no grand banquet, just a few close friends invited to the old villa above the music shop. I wore a simple off-white satin gown and a pair of pearl drop earrings left by his mother. He played Schumann's Widmung as a prelude. The piano sounded like water, flowing across the sunlit wooden floor, flowing past the newly placed pear blossoms on the windowsill. When we exchanged rings his hand trembled slightly, the playing band rested on my ring finger for a moment before he slowly pushed it all the way on. So light, yet like some kind of eternal settling. All right. He lowered his head and kissed the back of my hand. Now you belong to me. The guests laughed and applauded. Outside the window the Chinese parasol trees were putting out new buds, tender and translucent green. The days after marriage were like a slow adagio. We lived in an apartment with a small courtyard in the southern part of the city. He still went to the music shop to tune instruments and teach, and occasionally traveled abroad for performances. I picked up my paintbrush again and set up a small studio in the north-facing room. Life acquired clear contours, the shared aroma of coffee in the morning, the interweaving of black and white keys and vibrant color blocks in the afternoon, and the silhouettes of us side by side trimming roses in the courtyard at dusk. We rarely fought. On the rare occasions we did disagree, it was usually him who stopped first, coming over to wrap his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on the crown of my head. "Rest for a bit," he would say. "Say it when you feel like saying it." At night, we often curled up on the sofa watching old films. His fingers would unconsciously play with my hair, leaning against his shoulder, drowsy, I could hear his steady heartbeat. Like the tide, eternal and reliable. News about Victor came in fits and starts. He and Vivian never ended up marrying. They say the engagement banquet had even been booked, but it was called off at the last moment. Some said it was over a dispute about money, others said Vivian had climbed onto a higher branch. The murkiest rumor was that Victor, drunk one night, had struck Vivian over some ambiguously named contact on her phone. Truth or falsehood was hard to tell. But once, at an opening reception in a gallery, I caught a glimpse of him from afar. Victor stood at the edge of the crowd, his suit was still expensive, but it looked hollow. His eyes swept the gallery, and the instant our gazes met, he flinched as if burned and abruptly turned his face away. He soon turned and left, his retreat a little hurried. Damien had been discussing the brushwork of a painting with me and hadn't noticed. I withdrew my gaze and gently set the champagne on the waiter's tray. "Tired?" he asked softly. "A little." I looped my arm through his. "Let's go home." It was drizzling that evening. As the car passed the old quarter, I saw Victor walk out of a small tavern alone. He had no umbrella, the fine rain soaked his hair and shoulders. He stood at the curb and lit a cigarette, the flame blinked once in the dusk, revealing a face that had grown noticeably gaunter. The light turned green and the car eased away. In the rearview mirror, that silhouette grew smaller and smaller until it vanished into the hazy curtain of rain. Like an old painting streaked with water, its colors had faded and its outlines could no longer be made out. I did not look back. Another autumn, and I held my first solo exhibition. The theme was the shapes of light and time. What I displayed were mostly fragments of our lives, moonlight on the windowsill, fingers dancing across the piano keys, the damp roses in the courtyard after the rain. Damien played at the opening. When the last piece ended, he came to my side and, in front of everyone, naturally leaned in and kissed my cheek. Amid the applause, a gallery owner who knew us well laughed and teased, "Mr. Damien is famous around here for being an iceberg, and now he's turned into spring snow melting in the sun." He smiled too, took my hand, his fingertips warm. "It's Serena's doing." On the third day of the exhibition, I received a bouquet with no name attached. White irises, paired with a few deep green eucalyptus leaves. The card was blank, stamped only with the goldfoil logo of a familiar florist, the one Victor used to order from. I divided the flowers among several glass vases on the gallery's front desk, mixing them with the other congratulatory arrangements. When I turned, I saw Damien standing in front of a painting. The painting depicted an old street on a rainy night, a street lamp diffusing a warm yellow glow, puddles on the ground reflecting two blurred, side-by-side shadows. He stood there looking at it for a long time. I walked over and gently took his hand. He clasped mine back, his grip tender and sure. Outside, the autumn sun was just right. Light filtered through the plane tree's branches and leaves, casting flickering, gilt-like specks across the wooden floor. The night the exhibition ended, we curled up on the sofa tallying postcards. Some visitors left blessings, some earnest children had used colored pens to draw wobbly pianos and little flowers. At the very bottom was a plain white card. On it, in a single line of small printed type, it read, "The light in your paintings is beautiful." There was no signature. The handwriting was neat, with no trace of a personal pen. Damien was resting his head on my shoulder, breathing evenly. I picked up the card, held it to the light, then gently slipped it into a heavy art book. When I closed the book it made a soft snap. Like shutting a distant story that had long since been written. "Tired?" he mumbled, his arm tightening around my waist. Not tired. I switched off the floor lamp and leaned into his arms as the night grew deeper. I just feel, it's perfect like this. He murmured sleepily, kissing the top of my head. It will stay good. Moonlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, laying a soft silver path across the floor. Outside, the night wind threaded through the plane trees, rustling. Like time itself, it was moving gently, deliberately, toward a deeper, farther calm. And here, in this hush, I finally found my own complete place of belonging.